You might have heard people say that all life is suffering and that that is a principal teaching of Buddhism, and wondered what that could possibly mean. I find it a frustrating translation myself, and lots of people do, a frustrating translation of the word dukkha. So I want to talk today with you about my own experience of what I think dukkha is in terms of how I experience it. I don't really usually like using untranslated words, but it is such a hard word to pin down in English. And at the end of the video, I would like to think with you about why it's so hard to find a word in English to represent the word dukkha. I think it's interesting that we haven't got a word, and it tells us something about our own cultures within the West. So let's think about that too. But first, let's think about what it might mean. And there are lots of words that are tried out really to translate this word, but just to be clear, in case you don't know, very quickly, the Four Noble Truths are considered traditionally to be the first thing that the Buddha taught after he was enlightened. And the first of those is that all of life is suffering. He then goes on to make three more propositions off the back of that one, each one building on the next. All life is suffering. Suffering is caused by grasping or attachment or greed. Again, really difficult to translate. And therefore, if all of suffering is caused by our attachments, then we have to become unattached in order to stop suffering. And the way to do that is to follow the path of Buddhism. So that's a really quick what the Four Noble Truths are. And perhaps I should have those up on the screen. I will have done that. Future me will go back in time and do that. And so you can see them. So the first one then, all life is dukkha, or all life is suffering is often used, all life is unsatisfactory is sometimes used as a translation, all life is longing, all those kind of words. But for me, although I have a preferred word, really I have a preferred experience to explain of what dukkha means to me, and I'd love to know if this resonates for you. I think it's universal. It's both universal and very particular. I think that's what I like about what I think dukkha really means. So I have, from a very young age, felt like the world is not as it could be. And I suspect you feel like that as well. In fact, we all do. And the most famous Buddhist story, I think, is just there to illustrate this very fact. It's the story of one of the lives of the Buddha, where he is a prince and he's protected all his life up until as a young man. He's protected from all the bad things in the world in a walled garden palace of luxury. And then he goes out on his chariot with his chariot rider who drives him around, and he sees four sights. And those four sights open his eyes to the world as it really is. And those four sights that he sees a sick person, an old person, a dead person, and somebody who's a holy person looking for truth. He sees those four things. And that changes his life. And he goes off then to try and work out what the meaning of life is, or more specifically, why we all experience dukkha. So that question is the question that sends him off to become eventually the enlightened one, the Buddha. Why do we all experience dukkha? Why do we experience this thing? And although you and I brought up in palaces and cosseted, though there are some people out there who were, we all have this experience. We're born, and when we're born, we don't know that there is a difference between the world as it is and the world as it could be. When we're born, we don't reflect on suffering. We don't even know that we're individual or have a sense of ourselves as individual people with our own separate thoughts. All of that is yet to come. And for each of us, in different ways, over time, we discover that the world is not how we would like it to be. We discover sickness, we discover suffering, distress, death. We discover that nobody comes when we cry, when we're little babies, because nobody understands what it is we're crying about. And then we get to an age where we can reflect on that, and then a relative dies. For some, it's much, much worse. Some people experience terrible trauma in their lives very early on. But each of us at some point realizes that the world as it is not as it should or could be, and that there is a gap between those two. And it's a thing we teach in organising. We get groups together and we get them to write down a list of words which represent the world as it is, which really is the world as they have experienced it and reflected on it. So we get them to write down all the words about the world as it is, and then all the words for the world as it should be. And by and large, people start with negative words to describe the world as it is. We don't ever tell them to, but they always think that's what we're asking for, and that's what they do. And then we push them a little bit to remind them that the world isn't terrible. But it's words like unjust, unfair, unequal, polluted, power hungry, all those kind of phrases and words come out in the world as it is. And then we talk about the world as it should be, and people say green, clean, fair, just, kind, all those words. But what's interesting as well is they don't always agree. We don't agree with each other about the difference between the world as it is and the world as it should be. We don't even agree about what the world is like because we experience it differently. So some people would say the world is a scary place because they've experienced things that make them afraid. For other people, they've lived a life where they're blessed with rarely having to experience that. So that's nowhere near the top of their list. And so on and so forth. So we don't all have the same experience of the world as it is, or have the same values, the same narrative, the same upbringing. And so we don't all have the same idea of the world as it could or should be. But we do all have the gap between the two. We all grieve the difference between those two. And for me then, the word dukkha is best translated as grief. All life is grief. And for all of us, from when we first realize growing up that the world isn't perfect, we carry that. We carry that forever, that knowledge that the world isn't perfect, that the world is not as it could or should be. And the carrying of that with us, regardless of whether we are experiencing something joyful or miserable, regardless of whether we are in pain or comfort, and or hopeful or depressed, whatever, we always carry that grief with us, that knowledge. We never lose it. Sometimes we bury it or it's just in the background, but it's never gone completely. And I think that's what the Buddha meant by all life is dukkha. All life is the awareness of the gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. It's grief. And it's universal because we all have the gap, but it's very particular because we all have a gap between two. We all perceive the gap between two very different things, depending on our experience and our values and our worldview generally. Why then is this word dukkha so hard to translate into English? I really think it's because we don't talk enough about this feeling. We don't talk about feelings a lot anyway, but we have words for loads of other feelings. We struggle to talk about this gap. And I love that about community organizing, that they deliberately and explicitly, in every training of every type of organizer I've seen, they deliberately talk about this gap between the world as it is and the world as it should be. We don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about how that feels enough. And because we don't talk about it, we don't have enough words to describe it. But Buddhism is literally an answer to that question, or a proposed answer to that question. That's all of Buddhism. All of Buddhism is an attempt to answer the question, what do we do with the feeling that we carry that the world is not as it should be? That's it. It's that simple. The rest is just trying to figure that out.